If you know me, then you already be knowing that I produce on my UA Twin X and typically use some sort of calibration via SoundID. So today, we're diving into something I'm really excited about, a new way to dial in your mixes with this killer setup using SoundID reference and Universal Audio's Apollo X interface. If you're serious about getting your mixes to sound pro, especially if you're in a smaller room or home studio, this integration might be exactly what you need. Trust me, it's going to help you hear exactly what's going on in your tracks without the usual guessing game. So, let's get into it. Before we hop in, a few quick announcements. One, I just dropped an absolutely fire-complete masterclass on bass music production. It's over 17 hours of content learned from the top music production schools in the nation. And at the time of filming this, there's a sale where it costs less than dinner and you can get half off ABLETON Live and a number of other plugins as well. So that's linked in the description if you want to check it out. Also, I just dropped a completely free monthly care package system where every month I send y'all a free sample pack, a free ABLETON devices, some news on some free stuff and more, linked in the description as well. Also, if you need this upgrade for the UA SoundID integration or a completely new purchase, you can find both linked in the description. Let's get into the video. All right, first things first. You've probably heard of SoundID reference if you've been in the production game for a minute. If not, let me catch you up. This is calibration software that basically cleans up all the weirdness that happens when you're mixing in an untreated room. Most of us are mixing in spaces that aren't perfectly treated, right? And that means your sound can get all sorts of weird. Too much bass, too little high end, or even just weird resonances that throw everything off. SoundID reference works by measuring your room acoustics and creating a custom profile that compensates for those issues, so you're getting as close to a flat or neutral response as possible. And this isn't just a gimmick. Over 200,000 studios use this software. It's the real deal. Then you have the Apollo X by Universal Audio. I mean, if you know audio interfaces, you know Apollo is a beast. It's what tons of pros use because it's got insane clarity and pretty much gives you that big studio vibe even if you're recording or mixing at home. The Apollo X is particularly known for its quality, both in terms of how it sounds and how solid it is. So, bringing SoundID reference into the mix with Apollo X, this setup just levels everything up. Now here's how the integration works and why it's actually useful. Normally, when you want to calibrate your room with SoundID reference, you'd run it as a plugin on your master track in your DAW, but with this integration, you can actually load that calibration profile directly into the Apollo X. What does that mean? It means you're not using up any CPU in your DAW and you're not adding any latency because it's all handled within the Apollo hardware itself. This gives you real-time, calibrated sound from your speakers without slowing anything down or adding a bunch of extra processing. So here's how you set it up. You go through the measurement process in SoundID reference, which honestly feels like having an engineer guiding you through everything. You're just moving the mic around as it tells you, and it picks up all the details about your room's acoustics. This even works if you're using a surround setup up to 9.1.6, so it's not just for stereo. This could be super useful if you're doing any kind of immersive sound work. Once it's done measuring, SoundID reference generates a profile based on what it found. This profile basically adjusts for any problem areas in your room. If your room is heavy on bass, for example, the profile evens that out so you're not hearing extra low end that's not actually in the track. And you're not locked into a single flat setting either. You can adjust things like the frequency response and even create target curves to match different styles or preferences. Like if you're working on bass heavy music, you can tweak the low end to match the vibe you want. It's super customizable. What's crazy is that with the profile running through the Apollo X, your sound is instantly clearer and more accurate. So instead of struggling with muddy mixes or having to constantly check your mix on different speakers, you get an accurate representation right from the start. This is honestly such a huge help. You know those times when you think your mix sounds fire and then you check it on headphones or in the car and it's like, whoa, what happened to the bass? This integration makes that a thing of the past. Let's talk about the difference this makes in a mix. When you don't have calibration, you're constantly guessing, right? You might be boosting or cutting frequencies just to make your mix sound good in your room. With SoundID reference and Apollo X working together, what you hear is actually what's there. So, if you're mixing bass, for example, you're hearing exactly where it sits without having to compensate for any room issues. Same with the highs. You can dial in your vocals, hi-hats, or synths with that crispness without having to overdo it. This just gives you a ton of confidence, especially when you're working on complex projects with lots of elements. And if you're a producer who does your own mixing and mastering, this setup is even more clutch. You can focus on getting creative instead of worrying if your mix is translating. Let's be real. No one wants to spend hours tweaking a mix just to realize later that it sounds off because of your room acoustics. This system lets you move faster, trust what you're hearing, and just make better decisions in your mixes. One more thing I've got to point out is how seamless this makes the workflow. Since the calibration is handled directly in the Apollo X, it's just set up and forget it. You're not dealing with plugins or extra latency, so you're getting real-time feedback from your speakers. And that's a big deal if you're working with timing-sensitive stuff like vocals or intricate rhythms, where even a tiny bit of latency can throw things off. Mark.